Thank you for joining me on this Breath of the Wild retrospective. This game is really awesome in many ways, and this is going to be in part like specific memories to my first playthrough slash my time with this game throughout the years, but also me reviewing specific aspects that I think are really cool, things I wish could have been different, and I wanted to make this review slash retrospective before the new game Tears of the Kingdom came out. Because I didn't want my memories to be retroactively changed, I didn't want my opinions to be affected by the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Because that's what happens with time, you know, opinions change, you grow. The things you enjoy grow. There's new media for you to enjoy. So I gotta capture this while we're still in a time of innocence before the game's sequel comes out. Hello, my dears. Hero here. I use they, them pronouns. If you have the time, we have the beer. I cannot say the kind of beer because I'm not officially sponsored. It's time to peer into the past at long last. It's time to talk about Breath of the Wild. I promised I would talk about this game. It only took me 2+ years. Next time, review meets retrospective. I will be celebrating the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's 4-year anniversary. This is my original copy of Breath of the Wild. You'll notice that the cover is flipped inside out. My very first video on this channel was one where I flipped all my Nintendo Switch game covers inside out. See which ones look cool, which ones look not as cool. Breath of the Wild, definitely one of the best. And kind of what inspired that whole experiment. I'll make a card, you know, for you to watch that video. It was my first video, still very proud of it. I pre-ordered my copy of Breath of the Wild. I pre-ordered it with my Nintendo Switch. My last video that I did, I talked about the whole experience of the Switch launch and me pre-ordering it and how the whole Switch launch along with this game was so special. Once again, I'll leave a card. You can watch that video when you're done with this one, of course. The very first thing I did when I popped into Breath of the Wild was I took my game card. There was a lot of discourse around the fact that they basically bug sprayed the Switch cartridges. They taste like bug spray so that little kids, dogs, don't put these very small cartridges that it's amazing they can fit such large games like Breath of the Wild on such a small cartridge. I think launching Breath of the Wild with the Switch was a cool proof of concept. Putting it on such a small card, such a massive revolutionary game. Sometimes Switch games come out and you're like, holy, the Switch needs an upgrade in power. But one of the very first games on the Switch was such a powerhouse and showed what the Switch could do. The only real part of the game that performs lower is when you go to the Lost Woods. The game kind of crawls a bit. All the lighting and shadow effects does affect that NVIDIA 1 chip. So yeah, amazing. They fit a huge game on such a small card. Potential that a kid or a pet could choke on it. They bug sprayed the thing, made it taste horrible so that people, those like more innocent minds, wouldn't accidentally choke on this thing. And of course what everyone did, like the fucking Tide Pod thing. Oops, sorry, swear word. We're past 30 seconds. Everyone was putting it on their tongues to be like, oh, what does this game taste like? Stupid, stupid. I did it too. And today I'm gonna do something even stupider. Can we amp up the stupid? Yes, we can. Bob the Builder would be, I wouldn't use the word proud. Today I'm gonna go for a record. I don't know if this is an actual record that exists, if this is the first attempt or not, but I'm gonna go for longest amount of time keeping a Switch game, which tastes nasty, parentheses, on your tongue before spitting it out. I don't know if anyone has timed themselves. I feel like this is gonna be awful. I'm not gonna go past 10 seconds, but 10 seconds is my goal. So we're gonna hit start the moment It hits my tongue. Okay. It's not so bad. Wait, leave it there. It's very bad. It's very bad. Sorry for anyone who's sensitive to puke sounds. Holy. It definitely wasn't 110. I'll have to show the timer on a. In post, I'll determine what the actual final time was, but I think I made my goal in past a minute. Holy shit. Oh. That was god awful. Did I beat the world record? It like went through phases of like, I could kind of numb to it, desensitized, like, oh, it's just a thing on my tongue. But even now, it... Oh, that wasn't smart. Guys, that wasn't... Oh my god, that wasn't smart. So yeah, that was the first thing I did with my copy of Breath of the Wild, was I put it on my tongue for a second, not a minute. Oh, okay. Oh, please, I hope I beat the record. Ooh. I know this seems dramatic and overplayed, but... Ooh. Rip. Hold up. Just give me a sec, okay? I need to brush my teeth. This was another surprise to me. The French-Canadian voice dub for this game, and now also Breath of the Wild, I think is the definitive dub for Breath of the Wild and Hyrule Warriors. I think the actors, I know that the Zelda actor for the US Zelda gets a lot of hate, and ironically, she's a Canadian actress. I don't think she does a bad job at all. I think Patricia Somerset, Zelda's voice actress in the US, does like a passable job. I think she does a passable job. But like this Zelda, with the French-Canadian one, I love her.
Mère et moi avons beaucoup discuté à son sujet. Nous pensions qu'elle renfermait sûrement un pouvoir spécial. Mais en fin de compte, je n'ai jamais réussi à déterminer son utilité. Croyez-moi, père, plus nous en apprendrons sur le fonctionnement de ces reliques, meilleures seront nos chances face au fléau.
Certes. Mais tu oublies que là n'est pas du tout ton rôle.
Je n'ai nullement l'intention d'abandonner mon entraînement. Mais... j'essaie seulement de servir le royaume au mieux, de me rendre utile autant qu'il est possible.
So, that was really dope. It really surprised me. There's a lot of spectacular voice performances. Throw on some subtitles if you like doing Japanese dubs anyway for anime. If you check this game out or are replaying Breath of the Wild, I highly recommend giving those Canadians a shot. Thank you, everyone. I have now regained my composure. Breath of the Wild is one of the best games of all time. I think we can end the video right there, right? No? Okay. Let's talk about why this game is so cool. Other YouTubers have talked about this to death, so I won't linger too long, but one thing that's really nice for video game veterans plus newcomers to more complex open world games is the fact that most of the things you do in Breath of the Wild, actions you can take, they don't just tell you the button you have to press, they show the whole selection of buttons relative to each other on the controller. This is apparent in the very first area where you get the Sheikah Slate. You run up to the place where you activate / get your Sheikah Slate. And even though it's just like hit the A button, that's a basic video game thing. It doesn't just say hit the A button, it shows you the A button relative to all the buttons on the controller. This is really nice for maybe an Xbox player who, whenever they shift to Nintendo controllers, they're like, ah man, everything's turned 90 degrees, these letters are meaningless to me. And I feel that way when I play Xbox systems, since I don't personally have a lot of history with Xbox consoles. I get why that's confusing, and that's why it's really smart for Breath of the Wild to be very clear with its presentation of controls. Like I said, other videos have talked about this in a way that sounds more educated than the way I'm talking about it. But I've seen many people play this game, and that aspect definitely does increase the accessibility of Breath of the Wild to people who are newer to more complex games. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you've definitely had to at least first beat the Great Plateau. It is one of the tutorial areas of all time. Objectively, it is very well constructed and does pace out the many systems you'll have to be juggling in Breath of the Wild. But I will admit, the old man, aka Santa Claus, aka the Fallen King, aka Zelda's dad, aka F you old man, I will admit that his very self-aware, like, ho ho ho, you have to finish the tutorial first, I know you want to do a lot, but you have to be patient, and I'm making you wait. Ha ha ha. I get why he's frustrating. But there is a specific part of the Great Plateau which I remember very vividly because of just how many ways you could tackle the problem. And that was the shrine located in the mountains where elevation goes up, it becomes snowier, and naturally there is a temperature gauge in the game. You can't just run out naked or with the little bit of clothes that you get just from the Shrine of Resurrection. The game is very realistic in the way that if you enter a very cold area and you're underdressed, Link will get cold and actually sustain slow damage over time because they're so cold. It's like the poison effect in old school Pokemon games where if you don't cure poisoning, if you don't do something to warm Link up, they'll just take bit damage until they literally pass out. You get a game over. And to get to this shrine at the top of the mountain where you have to unlock one of the runes before you can even finish the tutorial area, it's not as simple as run and gun, I'm gonna beat the cold. You have to have a method to at least survive and make it to the shrine. So I've seen a lot of cool ways for people to approach that. I played this game with my college suite at the time, and also some people from the neighboring suite. And there was a cool community vibe to this game where we all got together and would watch each other play and learn from each other, see the different ways in which you could solve the puzzles of this game. Collectively appreciate just how creative you could get with Breath of the Wild systems. One person figured out where the old man hid this like coat that you could wear. You have to like find the old man's journal and do this little side quest, and then you get this warm piece of clothing and you can run through the cold area no problem. One of like 6, maybe more of us actually found that gear and utilized it. Some people used hot food, spicy peppers, or food cooked with the spicy peppers to stay warm and get through the mountain, make it to the shrine. Right when you enter the cold area, there is a spot where you can cook meals. So some players will naturally go up to that, take the spicy peppers they also found in the area, make some spicy food, and then be like, wow, Link can eat the spicy food and go through this cold area without sustaining damage. My method was taking a torch and actually lighting that on fire and running through the mountain with a torch, avoiding as much combat as possible, and kind of like jetting it to the shrine, but with a small flame, Olympic runner style, and it was a close call, but I was able to make it to the shrine by using that initial torch. That torch burned out. I had enough food supplies that it wasn't spicy food, but I paused enough and ate the food to replenish my health that was being chipped at to kind of run and gun it to the shrine, but I also kind of prepared it because I knew the trip was long and arduous. So yeah, that was my approach. Not necessarily the smartest one, but I did it. I made it to the shrine. And this is just one instance of there being many ways to solve the same problem. Once you enter the shrines, you can either do it the way potentially Nintendo intended you to beat the shrine, but there's also many ways to cheese the game to do skips. And because there's so many runes that you can utilize, so many ways you can interact with the world, you'll see players prioritize different ways to conquer puzzles. To be a little more specific, I think everyone might have a favorite rune. My favorite rune is the stasis rune. Stasis is so cool. I loved when you first get it, you have to stasis the boulder to hit it with a sledgehammer, or at least that is one way you can get around the boulder. You whack it a couple of times, it shows you that stasis when you hit something and it's frozen. When it unfreezes, it builds up all that momentum. This was a mechanic that I had never seen in a game before, and I haven't really seen it since. And I had a lot of fun with messing around with stasis. I definitely did the thing where you would freeze boulders, hit it a couple of times, get on top of the boulder, and fly through the skies on a boulder. I don't know if anyone's favorite rune is Cryonisis, but I can see why people would like Magnesis a lot. There's a lot of metal things in the world, and even if you don't have really good weapons on you, if you can use Magnesis on a metal object and fling it around, you can do a good amount of damage to enemies, you can knock enemies off cliffs. It's a game where if you're creative enough, you don't have to have the best gear on you. Once you get those first runes from the tutorial area, you could, in theory, run straight to Ganon and beat them then and there. This was a selling point of the game, and yeah, speedrunners definitely did this, where they would basically beat Ganon with a stick. But more players will, of course, take their time, explore the world. You are given that goal of going to Ganon, beating Ganon, saving Zelda. This is the classic format of all Zelda games. But in the middle of that, you get to choose what exactly you're doing. The first big choice you have to make right before you leave the Great Plateau is when, after beating all the initial shrines in the tutorial area, you not only get the runes, you also get these spirit orbs. You go to the goddess statue in the Temple of Time and you realize that, oh, there was 4 shrines in this tutorial area, and every 4 spirit orbs you collect you can use to upgrade either your health or your stamina. It becomes suddenly clearer, oh, I have choice. Do I want more stamina, because that small stamina wheel in the beginning is annoying, or do I want a little more health? Do I want to take more hits? Because you can die pretty easily in the Great Plateau in that first area, especially as you're figuring the game out. Both are compelling because it's annoying to work around the stamina meter. More stamina definitely becomes helpful, but you do also want health. There are certain things you can cook to boost your stamina and health to limits beyond what your actual stamina and health meters are, which is nice. Because once again, you can be creative, there's workarounds. But you're not gonna know all this when you're first starting the game, and so yeah, you're like, ooh, do I want more health? Do I want more stamina? It's very fun. The strategy is simple, but everyone is given this choice, and then the rest of the game is choices of, ooh, what do I want to do next? There's so many things to do. I went for stamina. I really like the climbing part of the game. I'm, even to this day, climbing up a cliff face, and just there's this fun self-challenge to climbing mountains. It's a slow, but you're you're trying to race against time and beat the stamina meter, maybe finding little places where you can take breaks as you climb up the mountain and not accidentally getting too far up and running out of stamina and falling to your death. Definitely my favorite way of traversal.
You can literally, if you see a place, you can go there. You know, even in, you know, maybe like a Bethesda game, like Skyrim or Fallout, you can go most places, but the way the character movement works is like, oh, if you see a cliff, you can't really go there. But in Breath of the Wild,
you have to kind of like work around what the game lets you.
Yeah, but the climbing mechanic is so universal that you can climb on almost anything and you can go almost anywhere, which just really opens up the possibilities for what you can do and what you can discover.
Totally, and I think that's one of like Shigeru Miyamoto's strengths. A lot of people like have various things and criticisms about that guy, but one of the first things he did was like he just kept climbing stuff, like in the beta phases. He's like, we need climbing everywhere in this game.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it really makes the game just the level of being able to do it whatever you want, literally.
I have two friends that I can think of specifically that really liked the horse mechanic. They collected a lot of horses, would register them at the stables, and use their horses to gallop around the lands of Hyrule. This isn't something I would try personally until like my third playthrough of Breath of the Wild. And it was cool. I definitely underutilized horses in my first playthrough. If you want to replay the game, someone like me who wanted to climb and glide more can then be like, oh, I'm gonna try horses this time, and realize, oh yeah, horses are pretty cool too. And you can get like these massive units of horses that are tucked away just behind the Shrine of Resurrection where you first wake up. You can like glide behind that area and find these just absolute units of horses. You need a lot of stamina to be able to tame them. The area looks like it's covered in baobab trees. It's very distinct. You'll know where you are because it has these baobab looking trees, and the horses are gigantic. There's also Lynels, so it's not easy to just glide in there, get a horse, and ride out. You have to like be ready to dodge 2 Lynels on your way out. Or if you're far enough along in the game, fight them. But yeah, I was able to get a horse out of that area, register them. If you're able to meet this behemoth of a task, you get a behemoth of a horse. So shout out to the people who are like, yeah, I like horses. Horses are my thing in this game. Because while they're not like the perfect horse, I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is still the best horse-based game. There is like a collection aspect to the horses of this game because they have their own individual stats. And you'll just find certain horses that are like, yeah, this is my horse. So not perfect, but really fun. Like I said though, in those early days, I was a glider guy. Whatever like highest peak I could get to with my current limits, I would get to that peak, then I would jump off it and glide. I loved the gliding and climbing mechanics of Breath of the Wild. There's just something so special about traversing the world in that way. One thing I remember specifically was this was also around the time where I played Fortnite for the first time. That game also has a very specific glider that you can use. And so I was like, yo, what if there was a multiplayer version of Breath of the Wild? And, cause, you know, both games have gliders. What if potentially you could be in a Breath of the Wild sized world with other players and like manhunt each other? Many years later, a YouTuber slash Twitch streamer by the name of Point Crow would commission this exact project. And I was so excited for this to come out, but Nintendo does not like when people make multiplayer mods of their games. Any gaming company would be upset by this. And Point Crow put money towards it. So even though I really wanted to play this multiplayer mod of Breath of the Wild, this idea I had early on when I played Fortnite of, yo, what if Breath of the Wild could also do this kind of thing, like Fortnite? Point Crow was trying to achieve that kind of thing. He even had videos where he had people manhunt him in Breath of the Wild. Kind of Fortnite-y. So it was like this dream, this inkling of an idea I had come true by a fan of Breath of the Wild. But you have to be careful with Nintendo IP. Even though they have a lot of leeway with what you can use on YouTube, like gameplay and music, most of the time we are allowed to use video game play and music in our videos without having to worry about our videos getting striked. But if you do a point crow and push the limits and put 10,000 grand towards a multiplayer mod of Breath of the Wild, even though that would make a dream come true for a lot of people, it's an unfortunate reality where that's a no-no in the IP world. Another more niche method of traversal in this game that I personally really enjoy, that I returned to Breath of the Wild to do just this specific thing, is the act of shield surfing. In Breath of the Wild, there's a lot of mountainscapes in the snowy mountains and the sandy mountains, and you can also do this on grass, but it does damage your shield faster, where Link will just hop on their shield, flip into like a surfer move, and suddenly be surfing on their shield down the mountainside. It's really epic, it's really satisfying to pull off. And another thing unique to Breath of the Wild, where I've never really seen something done like this before, but it feels very video gamey, feels very apropos for Nintendo. We were both playing the game together in suites, and that was cool. What's kind of like the first thing you remember about like when you got the chance to play the game?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just like the level of freedom that they put into that game. Where, like, on the Great Plateau, you're kind of directed, sort of the tutorial stage. But once you get off of that, it sort of points you in, like, hey, this is sort of the direction you should go in. But you can really just go anywhere, and you can do things in any order. And it felt much more natural than a lot of other open-world RPGs. Like, a lot of games are like, go here, do this. Like, you need to do this, and kind of push you along there.
Rockstar games with like their mission structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a big one, I think. So one of the major optional quests in Zelda Breath of the Wild that you don't have to do to beat Ganon, but most players will probably do, at least on their first playthrough, is take on the Divine Beasts. I know a lot of people typically take on Mipha first. You have to defeat the Divine Beast Varuta, this giant elephant creature, in combat with the help of a Zora companion, fan favorite character Prince Sidon, to make a way into the Divine Beast and basically purify it from the corruption of Calamity Ganon. You rinse and repeat this formula for all 4 of the Divine Beasts, and you can approach them in any order, but most people will take on Varuta first. In my case, I'm a little special. I'm not like other Breath of the Wild players. I took on Va Meadow first, the giant bird. You have to challenge it with this bird, Teba, who is the descendant of the character with the highest ego ever, Revali.
So I know he's a dick, but I just love Revali.
Impressive, I know. Very few can achieve a mastery of the sky. Yet I have made an art of creating an updraft that allows me to soar. It's considered to be quite the masterpiece of aerial techniques, even among the Rito.
Revali. Revali, I think, is a weird character because you have to believe his hype, but he's also cocky. And so, like, his voice in this dub, the French-Canadian voice dub, is the perfect Revali voice. I'm just gonna cut to the clips.
Tu as beau être fort. Tu n'iras pas plus loin.
Non, arrêtez!
Je m'efforcerai donc de l'accomplir avec honneur. Pour ça, aucun problème. Ce qui me dérange, c'est autre chose. J'ai dit ce que j'avais à dire. À présent, je crois qu'il est temps de vous montrer à tous la puissance de la créature divine Vamedo.
So yeah, Revali, he's still just so insufferable at times, but I believe his hype way more in this dub.
Adieu! En Encore une victoire pour moi. Encore une victoire pour moi.
Une autre victoire pour moi. My favorite Revali line is whenever you have multiple characters in a level and you switch to Revali, they say his name and then he says, "I understand," which has a nice, just like, rhyme scheme to it when it comes up. Revali, j'ai compris.
Revali, j'ai compris.
Ear candy. Did I even say why I was playing this game in French Canadian? My father is French Canadian and I am half French. But when I saw there was specifically a French Canadian dub, like Quebec French and like New Brunswick French is so specific, I just had to play it. And it really did remind me of home. And because these characters do all have some level of nuance, and I'm seeing more of that with this voice cast, so that was really dope. For lack of a better phrase, the French-Canadian voice cast really brings the fallen champions to life. I feel like I now have a way better sense of them as characters. And thanks to time travel shenanigans in Hyrule Warriors, we also do get to further explore the dynamic between the champions and their descendants, aka the companions who help you in Breath of the Wild. The companions you find to take on the divine beasts, they inherit the will of the past champions who originally stood with Link 100 years ago to defeat Ganon. They failed, so now their ancestors have to help Link to try to reclaim Hyrule and save Zelda. And the reason a lot of people will take on the elephant first, that'll be a lot of people's first divine beast, is because it's so close to Kakariko Village, which is where you accept the divine beast quest. So it's just like natural, you're gonna travel there next. In my playthrough of Breath of the Wild, I wanted to unlock the entire map before I challenged a single divine beast, which meant climbing all the towers in the game and unlocking a bunch of shrines and basically buffing up Link's stats. So then once I got a sense of the world, my favorite area that I visited was the Rito village. And so I took on Va Meadow first. I honestly think that divine beast, the outside combat you do with the beast, also the inside dungeon and the boss, it's the most fun. It may be the easiest of the game, but I don't find the divine beast puzzles super duper satisfying. I do prefer Zelda dungeons of yore that had a little more thematics to them. In this game, it was important for every divine beast to be similar because any divine beast could have been your first one. And Va Meadow, even though it was similar to all the others, I think since its puzzle was pretty straightforward, it didn't overstay its welcome like other divine beasts will, like the camel. Plus, every divine beast you defeat, you get some special power-up to Link that drastically changes the game. When you free Va Meadow, you get Revali's Gale, and Revali's Gale is this gust of wind you can summon at any moment. It does have to recharge. But when you have it, you can suddenly shoot yourself up into the air and get a lot of vertical height. It's a very nice addition to Link's kit in this game that has a lot of vertical traversal focus. This kind of move, even though it's like a cheat or a super move, a power-up, it fits perfectly in the world of Breath of the Wild. It was the most exciting to unlock. All the other buffs you get from the past champions are pretty standard. One is a straight up revive. Another is a instant shield. And the final one is just this area of effect screen nuke move. Urbosa's power summons lightning from the sky and just strikes all the enemies in the immediate area. So yeah, I lucked out deciding, yeah, I'm gonna take on Va Meadow first and getting Revali's Gale right away. Best champions, power up, whatever you call it. I love Revali's Gale. And it looks like in the new game you'll have even more ways to fly through the sky. So you know I'm excited for that. Unfortunately, I'll always be a little salty over the final story trailer for Breath of the Wild, because it did make this game seem to be, you know, your standard 3D Legend of Zelda with cutscenes and a fully fleshed out story. We have set precedent now from Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword to have a game with a story, a legend to this Legend of Zelda. And they gave us a story trailer that seemed to imply we would be getting another such outing of grand proportions. But the ironic thing is what we saw in the trailers was almost all of the story that the game had to offer. We basically got the outline version of Breath of the Wild's story presented through optional flashbacks that you could hunt down. And if you hunted down all 13 optional flashbacks, you would unlock like the game's true ending, but the true ending isn't that much cooler. A lot more people would probably be more upset that this game's story was so lackluster if the gameplay wasn't just so much fun. The pure fun and freedom that Breath of the Wild offers does excuse a lot of the less fleshed out story elements, because that's not really the point of that game at the end of the day. Just there was some marketing before the game came out that did imply there would be more story than there was, and they're doing the same thing again with Tears of the Kingdom. The latest story trailer teases at a proper legend, a full-on Link and Zelda versus Ganondorf story, not just the bare-bone elements of a Zelda story. And yeah, I think in the sequel to Breath of the Wild there should be more fleshing out of the story. So I really just hope we don't get burned a second time like we did with Breath of the Wild and the kind of false advertisement on the story side of the trailers. We at least got the game Hyrule Warriors, and even though that game does take place in an alternate timeline and does end with a happy ending when that could have never happened, because we know in Breath of the Wild that the kingdom fell in tragedy. But even the fact that that game exists and they expanded more on what happened 100 years ago for Breath of the Wild, the fact that they could make a whole game based around that shows how much story potential Breath of the Wild had, that for one reason or another, Nintendo just didn't really fully flesh out. Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, not the perfect solution to that, but if you were craving a little more from Breath of the Wild story, I would recommend checking that game out. I thought this wouldn't have a lot of substance to it, and I was surprised to how much it really fleshed out that lore of what happened 100 years ago. I think it does it well. And I'm really impressed with how much I care about this war. Discovering the towers ends up the watchtowers across Hyrule ends up becoming a really important plot point, because when you discover them, basically Pura, if you remember Pura from Breath of the Wild, she's in this game, she discovers that you can use these towers to literally track down your enemies. So there's now an in-universe explanation for why these towers exist beyond they give you vantage points on the Sheikah Slate. Back in the day, they were also used for a war effort, which makes so much sense. So much technology starts to be used by military, right? Another big part of this plot is the Yiga clan, and I always liked the little subplot with the Yiga clan in Breath of the Wild, and this makes the Yiga clan a really big part of the plan to revive Calamity Ganon in the past. I think I have said a lot about this story. It's a pretty fun time. Koroks. Korok puzzles are really fun. They're really obvious. You'll just be running along in the woods and it's like, oh, there's a rock on a chain and a place where you can move the rock that it like sits in a perfect divot. I wonder what that's all about. It's like these super not subtle puzzles just in the middle of the woods that you'll stumble upon, and you'll even hear a lot of the time the little Korok noises. Which is kind of this maraca-y sound. And so you approach it, bang out the puzzle real quick, and yahaha, you found a Korok seed. There's like over 900 Koroks in the game, so they are everywhere. And these are the best puzzle in Breath of the Wild, because the fun of the game is getting lost in the world and adventuring and finding little things to do. So also having these little puzzles, while they're like not slick, it does make your gamer brain go, ooh, task, must do. And then you get the dopamine hit, you get your little Korok seed. I love when they go, yaha! Paired by the classic Zelda. Korok puzzles, awesome. Shrines, maybe not my favorite, but I do like the micro dungeon idea. Some shrines are better than others. Any shrine that uses motion controls, like the one with the ball on a tilty table and you have to use your controller to move that around, those puzzles can F right off. But at least, even in the cases where you run into a shrine, a puzzle you're not a huge fan of, you'll either get it over with relatively quickly, or you can come back and try later, because once you've found the shrine, you can fast travel to it at any point. You don't necessarily have to beat the shrine to fast travel to it, which is another benefit to finding shrines in the first place.
I think I like the concept of the shrines. It keeps you exploring, it keeps you going to new places and trying out new things. I like that most of them are pretty short. Some of them are better than others. I think it works. It has yet to be seen whether it continues working through subsequent games. Because I guess part of it was the novelty. Ocarina of Time was my first Zelda game, so I've been playing them for a long time, and it was kind of nice to get a little shake-up of the formula, because every Zelda game, since Ocarina of Time, kind of every new Zelda game is basically the same game with a new gimmick.
A little Pokemon-like in that sense.
Yeah, and it was nice that they just completely re-envisioned things. Re-envisioned the way the dungeons work, re-envisioned the open worldness, re-envisioned even the mechanics.
Shrines are also how you get spirit orbs in this game, which are how you upgrade your hearts and stamina. And I never get tired of that visual of the old mummified sage releasing its spirit orb, giving it to Link looking super spooked, like what the heck, and then this monk just fading into the ether. Super cryptic, but powerful imagery. It does give the shrines a lot of personality. At the end of every shrine, you have this monk that's gonna say some cryptic stuff and then give you its spirit orb.
Upgrading, that is one thing I'll say, is that upgrading stats in this game is a lot easier and quicker than doing it in previous games, where there would be like 1 or 2 fairy fountains, and those are the only places to get it done.
Yeah.
Versus the shrines and trading in the spirits, I forget what they're called, but
spirit orbs.
Spirit orbs, yeah.
There are also a bunch of Lynels littered around the world, the lion-horse hybrid warrior things in Zelda. They're a very scary enemy to take on, and there is a whole range of different skilled Lynels. They're all scary, but there's some really, really scary ones down the road. And they all have really strong weapons that if you are able to take on the behemoth of a task and defeat one, for your high risk, you get high reward. I remember my roommate, the first year we played this game, one of his pastimes was to just ride around on his horse and challenge all the Lynels. I don't think he actually did, but his goal was to beat all the Lynels on the map. And he got pretty good at it. He was a professional Lynel hunter. I'm pretty sure, I remember him getting on the horse and being like, we're going Lynel hunting. It was fun. I was not as good at the combat in the early days of my time with Zelda, so I was not daring in that way. I just had fun watching him fight them. There's cooking, which at first I was super intrigued, ooh, what happens when you mix this with this? But there's some pretty clear set rules with how the cooking works, and it is fun. I would just look up the guide to cooking online before you cook to best utilize your resources. Because there are recipes where you can cook unique things, but there's more rules and rigidness behind the scenes with the cooking than it lets on at first. I do love cooking up a good meal, having that nice jingle play and hearing Link go. It makes you feel like you did a good job, and you did. You get a nice piece of food that'll become very useful to you because you'll take a lot of beatings and need a lot of food. So yeah, while it's not necessarily a really exciting cooking system, it is still very engaging and fun. Like how you have to cook hot stuff to stay warm in cold areas, and other effects will also allow you to traverse different environments. It works. The cooking in Breath of the Wild is charming. Weapons breaking. Snap! No. I would never. I love this thing. I don't think it's as annoying as a lot of people will say it is. Maybe in the early game when you're more strapped for resources, your weapons breaking on you can be frustrating. I remember being light on bows sometimes. But once you get far enough into the game, you actually run into the opposite problem where you kind of always have too much in your inventory and you have to drop weapons you don't use as much, and kind of just like every time you find a cool new weapon, be like, is it worth taking this one? Which one should I replace in my inventory? I have to find more Koroks to upgrade my inventory space so I don't have to keep doing this. So a lot of people complain about the weapons breaking, but I think it's fine. I think it is a good way to keep you cycling through and trying different gear, different weapons. How do you like the combat?
I think it works. Generally, it works pretty well. It keeps you cycling through weapons, and they break really often, but you get new ones really often as well, so it's not like all of your good weapons are gone and then you can't fight most of the time. I think it's balanced pretty well. One thing that I did find a little bit annoying was the Master Sword. It takes so long to get the Master Sword. You have to do so many shrines and build up so much stamina, and then it just constantly loses energy, and then it recharges after like 10 minutes, so it never breaks permanently. But I really would have loved if once you get the Master Sword, it just never breaks.
Totally.
And then maybe, you know, it has the thing where if it's close to Hyrule, then it does more damage. I think that's good. And maybe that runs out, but it never really like breaks. But I kind of wished, it was kind of annoying to use it and then immediately have it run out of energy and have to constantly switch back and forth. I think even if it was permanent, it's such a basic weapon, it doesn't really have any special properties, that if you would keep using the other weapons because they're so interesting and they do different things and they work differently. So I think it would have been nice to have had a permanent Master Sword as sort of a better reward for the amount of work it takes to get it.
It's interesting you mentioned that too, because I've now completed the DLC too, where
I couldn't do it.
it's like, but now it recharges so fast.
Oh, I thought it never dies. I thought that was the reward. See, that's not even like, and the DLC is really hard too. So like, I feel like, come on, like I feel like I need to get it. I just did all that. I need to get it permanently.
Speaking of weapons breaking, I just realized my swords are unsheathed. That's no good. These earrings are compliments of Maeve, my channel's biggest fan. Arguably, my parents are my biggest fans in general. But shout out to Maeve, they're here a lot and have been supporting the channel since the beginning. They're a good friend, and yeah, a card to a video we did together. Thank you again for the earrings. That's better. Now we can Zelda. Now we can breathe wild. Okay, so I was the one who bought the game. It was my Switch. You would expect naturally maybe I was the first person in the suite to beat the game, take down Ganon. I remember one day walking into my suite and not even one of my suite mates, one of the guys from across the hall. It's not really his fault because this was his style of game, to just plow through to the end as quick as possible. But I walk in my suite and he's engaged in combat with Ganon. That was my first look at Ganon, beyond what they showed of him flying around the castle in the early parts of the game. And I'm still salty about it. And I wasn't the only one too. I remember there was a whole night where me and my suite mates got together and being like, I can't believe, you know, he comes in here acting very entitled, coming in here and beating Ganon first. That's your game, hero. I'm like, yeah, I know, it was pretty upsetting, but I couldn't really say anything. And then I remember this guy then started playing The Witcher on my roommate's PS4, also in our suite in our common area, and either my roommate or our other suite mate was like, you can't do this, dude. We had to set some boundaries, and I was just like, oh man, I remember still like having our whole like venting session over this. And yeah, he beat the game before me. I didn't even beat my story that semester. I actually beat it over the summer. It was pretty much the first thing I did when I got home from college because I didn't have a lot else going on. So on the night I defeated Ganon, I made it special. I had just started smoking weed for the first time in college that year. And I brought just a little bit home. Not like a huge like stash, but enough to... When my parents weren't around, we lived in the middle of the woods, I could like just have a good time, sneak off, have a little puff. I also had some edibles because I just wanted like very discreet ways of being able to get high. I didn't have a lot of it, so it was like a treat throughout the summer. Every once in a while I would get high. And one of my first nights back, I was like, F it. Took one of my edibles and strapped in to beat Ganon. I remember raiding the castle, beating Ganon, finishing the game, being disappointed by the final cutscene that like the extra story you get really wasn't that much extra. But then I just like keep playing. It's cool. I caught up to that kid who beat the game first. Now I just can like do whatever I want. Once again, I'm in Breath of the Wild and I'm free. But there is like this lingering feeling in the back of my mind like, oh man, that edible wasn't shit. And if you ever taken an edible in your life, you'll know the next part where I'm suddenly playing Zelda, engaging in a round of good old shield surfing. When like suddenly I'm realized like I'm just like in my seat, like unable to move, like I'm playing the game, but it had hit. And I realized like, oh wait a minute, the edible did work after all. In fact, I think I've been high for the last hour. That same period of time where I'm like, this isn't working, it was like already working. I've actually been blitzed this whole time. Good stuff, good stuff. Solid night. When I beat Ganon, I was in the zone. And a lot of people who have smoked weed and played video games can probably attest to this, that there will be points where you can really lock in when you're high and playing games. You would think because, you know, there's like this whole like airhead association with people who smoke, but it can make you really task oriented at times, especially if you're like me and have ADHD. So yeah, that was the night I beat Ganon. Not the most PG way of beating this E-rated game. Forgot my actual carp is in there. That doesn't sound good. I broke it. No, not really. Okay. Years later, I would play the DLC of Breath of the Wild. The first pack was like, alright, not super memorable because it was very shrine focused. It gave you 12 new shrines to beat, and shrines are just kind of a thing that I do in Breath of the Wild. I don't love them, but I guess I don't hate them. But also in that first wave of DLC, there was this fun little challenge where you ran around with this weapon that dropped you to a quarter of a heart, so you would take one hit and die. But it was an insta-kill weapon, so you had to be perfect. You could not get hit, but you could hit everyone one time and one-shot them. So that was the most fun part of the first wave of DLC, and your reward for doing basically a bunch of busy work is you get a saddle that can summon your horse to you at any place on the map. They don't have to be just near you to hear your whistle, which is helpful, but like not as cool as the motorcycle you win by beating the second wave of DLC. And the second wave of DLC was really fun because it's just a big old gauntlet where you fight room after room of enemies, and it starts like that one island where Link shows up naked. You're once again in this enemy gauntlet with none of your gear, and you suddenly start to gather more weapons. They're not great at first, but they start to get better as you go down the floors. And what was fun about these trials was I actually played them with my friend Lynel. Yeah, Lynel, like the Lynels in this game. And they were there while I took on the master trials. And it took me a good amount of attempts. Let's just say that. So to have them there to hype me up and finally beat it eventually. Get the motorcycle too. It was years later from when I had first got the game, but I got to form yet another friendship by playing the Master Trials there with Lynel in the room. We also later would surprise my friend Lynel, our friend group collectively, we would all chip in to get them their first Nintendo Switch and a copy of Breath of the Wild. That might sound a little familiar from a recent video I did, and yeah, I loved gifting Switches, what can I say? I've bonded with a lot of people playing Breath of the Wild. If you've been listening to me ramble about Breath of the Wild for all this time, thank you for listening to me talk about Breath of the Wild and why it's so special. I've been hyping up this video a long time in my head, but when I finally sat down to do it, it's remarkably easy to actually talk about this game and get lost in thought about it. There was probably stuff I missed, but if for whatever reason you haven't played the game for yourself, you just should. And discover all the things I wasn't able to talk about for yourself. Because that's what it's all about. Adventure, discovery, and creativity. If I were to dissect every single bitty thing in Breath of the Wild, it would take out a lot of that magic for you. If anything, this is something I'm telling myself to make me feel better, that yes, I did say enough about the game. This is an appropriate enough retrospective / review. Your video is good enough. Your video is valid. At least I hope so. The bottom line that I want to communicate is that I've had a lot of fun with this one, and I think I did that. Everyone should at least try Breath of the Wild once in their life. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, yada yada yada. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay super.